He flipped through the pages like everyone else, skimmed the legal jargon, trusted the lawyer, signed the line. It was just paperwork, standard, routine, nothing that raised alarms. But buried near the end was a sentence he barely noticed. Just a single line. Not bolded, not highlighted, not explained. And that one line would end up costing him years of missed opportunities, drained income, and legal chains he couldn't shake. Here's the truth no one tells you. Divorce paperwork isn't just about what's fair, it's about what's enforceable. The law doesn't care how exhausted you were, how civil the process seemed, or how cooperative you tried to be. Once you sign, the deal is real. And if you didn't read that one line, the one that gave up your right to change the agreement, the one that handed her final say, the one that allowed your wages to be garnished without warning, it won't matter later. Because courts don't rewind, they enforce. And while you try to move on, that sentence will still be there, quietly reshaping your future year after year. So before you rush to sign and close the chapter, stop and ask yourself, what did you actually agree to? Because the clause that seems harmless today could be the one that haunts you for the next 20 years. It usually shows up near the end, tucked between lines about enforcement and jurisdiction. It's called a non-modification clause, and it sounds harmless until it's not. This one sentence can lock your financial obligations in place permanently. That means no matter what changes in your life, job loss, medical issues, retirement, you might still be legally bound to pay exactly what you agreed to years ago. Most men don't even realize they've signed it. They assume spousal or child support can be adjusted later if circumstances change. But with a non-modification clause, the court's hands are tied. Even if your income drops by half, or your ex-partner suddenly starts making more money than you do, the amount you agreed to is set in stone. And the worst part? Judges enforce it ruthlessly. It sounds like a commitment to fairness, but it's actually a trap. Life changes, incomes shift, health declines. But if you've already signed away your right to adjust, you're stuck. And by the time most men realize the weight of what they agreed to, it's too late. The court doesn't care how different your situation is now. It only cares what you signed back then. It's easy to think that agreeing to mutual decision-making on major issues like your child's education, healthcare, or religion is a way to keep things balanced. But what most men don't see is how vague language in those clauses can become a weapon later. Phrases like "we'll consult each other" or "both parents must agree" sound collaborative, but in court, they create deadlocks. And guess what happens when you and your ex don't see eye to eye? She gets the upper hand, especially if the child lives with her most of the time. Judges hate uncertainty. So when both parents have equal say but can't agree, the court often sides with the parent who appears to be the more stable or consistent influence. And in many cases, that means defaulting to the custodial parent's wishes, no matter how reasonable your concerns may be. So while you thought you were signing up for fairness, what you actually did was give your ex the power to stall every important decision. School choices get delayed. Medical procedures become battles. Your voice is still on paper, but in practice, it's easily sidelined. And all because a single sentence gave her just enough room to control the outcome, while making it look like you had a say. There's a quiet line buried in many divorce agreements that waives the right to a full financial discovery. It's usually worded politely, something like both parties acknowledge full and fair disclosure of all assets. But here's the kicker. If you sign that without actually verifying everything, you've legally agreed that your ex was honest, even if she wasn't. That means if she hid a bank account, undervalued a business, or left out investments, you may never have a legal path to challenge it. Most men don't push for discovery because they want to keep things civil or avoid dragging things out. But civility doesn't protect your future. If there's no requirement to document every asset, retirement accounts, trusts, cryptocurrency holdings, you could unknowingly walk away from tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And once that waiver is signed, there's no going back. Courts will assume you did your due diligence, even if you never saw a single statement. It's one of the most overlooked traps in the entire process. You think you're agreeing to a clean split, but in reality, you're legally binding yourself to trust without verification. And if anything was hidden, concealed, or undervalued, you just sign away your right to ever do anything about it. Then there's the clause that sounds almost generous at first glance, often titled something like hold harmless or indemnification. On paper, it just means each party agrees to be responsible for their own debts. But buried within it is a legal time bomb. If your ex walks away from a joint credit card, mortgage, or loan that's technically in both your names, and she stops paying, the creditor still comes after you. And under that clause, you can't drag her back to court to fix it. What's worse is that credit damage doesn't wait for court proceedings. The moment she defaults, your credit score tanks, sometimes without warning. You're left cleaning up the mess, chasing down collections, or paying off debt that legally wasn't yours, all while having no recourse to recover the money. You can't sue her under the agreement. You can't renegotiate terms. Your hands are tied. Most men don't realize that divorce doesn't remove your name from joint accounts. Only the creditor can do that. So if you didn't push for account closures, debt reassignment, or direct refinancing during the divorce itself, this one clause can haunt you for years. And by the time the damage hits your credit report or drains your savings, the paper you sign becomes a wall you can't break through. One of the most deceptive traps comes in the form of vague future support agreements. Clauses that say something like each party waives the right to future spousal support unless agreed upon in writing. It sounds reasonable, even final. But here's where it gets dangerous. If your financial situation changes drastically years down the line, job loss, illness, retirement, you might assume you can renegotiate. You can't. That single sentence locks the door permanently. Even if you're struggling, even if she remarries and doubles her income, even if your own income drops to half of what it was when you signed, the court won't care. That one line, casually included in the fine print, just became a lifetime contract. And the kicker? Many men sign it just to get it over with. They're tired, emotionally drained, desperate to move on. So they waive support rights, thinking they're avoiding future drama, not realizing they've guaranteed it. It doesn't just affect spousal support, either. In some cases, that same wording can influence child support modification rights, especially if it's embedded in broader settlement language. You think you're just checking a box, but you're signing away your flexibility for the next 20 years. All because of a line that looked like it meant nothing. Then there's the line that seems like common courtesy. Something like, each party agrees to communicate respectfully and resolve disputes amicably. Sound harmless, even mature, right? But in practice, it can be used against you. If your ex wants to paint you as hostile, uncooperative, or emotionally unstable, all she needs to do is claim you violated this clause. It doesn't need to be evidence. Just an accusation that you sent a rude email or raised your voice during a phone call. Suddenly, you're facing legal complaints for breaching the agreement's tone. What makes it worse is that some divorce agreements allow attorneys to interpret a violation of this clause as a trigger for dispute resolution procedures. That could mean mediation sessions you pay for, legal letters that rack up hourly fees, or even court hearings. And here's the twist: she can remain cold, dismissive, or manipulative, but the moment you react emotionally, you're the one breaking the agreement. The clause doesn't define respectful. It's subjective, which means it's a weapon waiting to be used. In high-conflict divorces, this line gives your ex leverage to escalate small disagreements into costly legal battles, especially if you're the one trying to hold boundaries or enforce other parts of the agreement. What felt like a nod to civility turns into a leash around your voice, your reactions, even your ability to defend yourself. And by the time you realize it's being used against you, you've already spent thousands responding to accusations that started with a single, vague sentence. Another silent trap comes hidden inside parenting plans. Parental responsibilities shall be shared equally unless otherwise agreed. That sounds balanced on the surface. Fair. Cooperative. But here's the problem. What does "unless otherwise agreed" really mean when one parent controls the communication? If your ex simply refuses to agree, suddenly the equal part becomes meaningless. You can't enforce shared decision-making if every choice is stalled by one-sided silence. School choices, medical decisions, travel plans. If she doesn't reply or drags her feet, you're left stuck. Courts don't intervene on every minor dispute, and most men don't want to appear petty by dragging their ex back to court every time she ignores a question. So, over time, she makes all the decisions by default. Not because the court said she could, but because you were locked into a clause that required mutual agreement, without any power to compel it. Even worse, this clause often leads to a pattern where you're constantly asking for permission instead of asserting your role as a parent. It shifts the dynamic. You're no longer an equal. You're a visitor waiting to be granted access. And if you push back, it gets framed as controlling or uncooperative. That one vague sentence, inserted in the name of fairness, slowly rewrites your rights without a judge ever lifting a finger. So what looked like a fair document, neutral language, mutual agreements, shared responsibilities, can quietly turn into a trap that controls your money, limits your rights, and hands your future over to someone who may not have your best interests in mind. Divorce paperwork isn't just a formality. It's a contract that can lock in long-term consequences, even if you thought you were being cooperative, civil, or just trying to move on. One wrong line, one vague clause, one overlooked phrase, and you could be paying for it emotionally, financially, or legally for the next 10, 20, even 30 years. That's why no matter how tired you are, how eager you might be to put it all behind you, or how much pressure you feel to be the bigger person, you can't afford to sign anything without understanding every single word. These agreements don't just end a marriage. They shape what your life looks like afterward. The house, the kids, your income, your time, your peace of mind, it's all on the line. If nothing else, take this away. Never mistake quiet language for harmless intent. In divorce, the real damage is often written in the calmest voice. And once it's signed, undoing it isn't just expensive, it's nearly impossible.